way a little more. Okay, I got my goofy face. All right, let everybody file in here. Oh, that stupid live dive sale. I always forget to take that off. There we go. All right, boom. We got John. Welcome, John. Looks like we got some people coming in. Awesome. Oh, gotta mute myself here. Hey, Art. Welcome. Welcome, Jim. We'll get started here in a little bit. We got to get our friend Dr. Nick in here, so then we'll get started. We got a lot of great questions today, so excited to get started. Hey, Valerie, welcome back. Six people. Mark, welcome, Mark. Let's see what we got going on here. All right, no Dr. Nick yet. Give him another minute. Caitlin's back as well. We do miss you guys. All right, so hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. We'll get started here in a little bit. We're just kind of getting some things sorted on our end. You know you do too.
Hey, come on back.
Yeah, hey. Hey, Joanne. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you. Hey, Michelle. Hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. Let's see. Where is Dr. Nick? Well, I'll wait for Dr. Nick to file in here. I think we can go ahead and get started. All right. We actually got quite a bit of questions, so we definitely won't get through all of them today. We're going to do this for about half an hour. And then, yeah, we'll try to get through as many as we can. Of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the live chat here, and we'll do our best to answer them. Otherwise, we can always, take it away for next time, and we'll just add it to our list, and we'll get you an answer. You can bring my dog to hang out. I'm game. Yeah. We got dogs here on the regular, Caitlin, so I don't think it's a problem.
Yep. You got 2 dogs every day.
That's probably, yeah. Yeah, if you guys are regulars of our live dive sale, you probably have seen the 2 dogs that are Piper and Sophie. They're here every single day pretty much. We love them to death. So, yeah, dogs are welcome here just like fish. So, all right. Looks like everybody's, all right. Can you guys hear us okay? Just double checking. Welcome, Samuel, Peter.
No Dr. Nick.
No Dr. Nick. Okay, Michelle can hear us. Great. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Actually, this first question came in from Facebook, and Art. This came from Art, actually, just shortly before we started the live right now. So I'll go ahead and kick it off with Art's question. So he's afraid to move ahead with getting his dream 310-gallon saltwater tank, which would be fish, live rock, and inverts. His fear is not understanding how I would treat sick fish in a large tank. My plan would be to quarantine any new fish for 30 days before adding, but I can't imagine getting a sick fish out of this large tank with all the rock work that will be in place. I'm not aware of any medicines that won't kill the inverts, but I see big display tanks everywhere. So he knows people are doing it and dealing with it. I guess he just needs some guidance and reassurance that there are tools out there that can move ahead with his dream tank.
So, I mean, this is a great question because, I mean, that is a large tank. So when you have a large tank like that, and, he says it's his dream tank, I would imagine that he has a stocking plan, because when you're setting up a tank, especially a marine tank, you want to make sure you have a stocking list and you want to add them in a specific order, with that being least aggressive fish first, most aggressive fish last, so that way more aggressive fish don't become territorial to new additions, because like Art's really worried about sick fish. So when fish are stressed, whether that be the aggressor or the fish that's being terrorized, there's going to be a certain amount of stress there, and that's where things are going to pop up. So you want to make sure when you have a tank in mind, you want to make sure you have a stocking plan and you stick to that plan to the T almost, because you want to make sure that everything's compatible. And like I said, you want to add your more passive fish in first. That way they can become settled in, and they don't have to really worry about finding a territory and then defending it and fighting for it and all that stuff, because that's when some illnesses may pop up because of that undue stress. But while you're stocking the tank, you want to make sure that you're quarantining the fish. I mean, we always recommend doing a 30-day quarantine, and you can quarantine multiple fish at a time, and compatible fish, and they can be in a smaller. A lot of people will have a quarantine tank that really ranges in size. I mean, most of the time it's usually a 20 to a 50-gallon tank or so, and then you put the fish in there and you watch them for 30 days. You definitely want to treat them for flukes. Flukes is a big thing. Sometimes those don't always, the fish aren't showing symptoms of flukes, so you want to make sure that you treat them for flukes with praziquantel, Prazipro, stuff like that. That's a really good treatment. But other than that, you want to make sure that the water quality is good in your QT tank, and all the behavior is fine. They're eating fine, their color is fine, they're swimming fine, and generally, I mean, most fish will interact with you when you walk in the room. So if they're up front and they recognize you, that's a great sign right there. If they're hiding or they're not swimming as they should, then something's definitely wrong, and you want to dig into that and treat them with something broad spectrum. Obviously fin clarity and stuff like that is important too, because if the fins start to get cloudy, that's probably a sign of ick, and you can treat them with copper or minfin or something like that. But I would say that stocking the tank is the most critical part, making sure that you're doing it very slowly and precisely and sticking to your stocking plan. Don't walk into a pet store and just all of a sudden on a fish that looks cool and you don't know anything about, because that's when problems happen. I think that's about it.
Yeah, great. Actually, I'm going to take another quick question from the live chat that Joanne just put in here. Best starter fish for kids. Maybe you could do like a freshwater, saltwater version. Like, what would you recommend? First time tank for kids?
I mean, generally schooling fish, like for freshwater, schooling passive fish like smaller tetras, live bearers, maybe some smaller rainbows, stuff like that are really, really hardy fish. They're compatible, they're great colors. Usually you don't have to worry about, aggression, and you can get a good mix in there, and they're generally really easy to take care of. Generally, the larger the aquarium is, the easier it is to maintain. I would say a minimum of a 20 to a 30-gallon tank would be a good size. So you can get a good variety of fish in there in the tank. Because of the volume of the tank, it's pretty stable. When you do a smaller tank, the water quality tends to fluctuate more quickly. So I wouldn't go with anything smaller than a 20 or 30-gallon. And same thing, do your research first before you add the fish. As for a marine tank, same thing. I would not go anything smaller than 30 gallons. And same thing, stocking level. Generally clownfish, firefish, gobies, maybe some more peaceful flasher wrasse are cool. And those are all compatible fish.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, generally with marine tanks, you got to be a little bit more careful, and you got to pay the adult size of the fish too, because they tend to get
You and I got a little closer
as they get bigger.
So we got Dr. Nick joining. Thanks. Thank you so much, Dr. Nick. Always a pleasure to have you. So yeah, we had a couple of questions. Thank you so much, Patrick. Great answer. Actually, I'm going to go to the next question here. This is a question. Actually, before I do that, I should give a little background. Oh, it looks like we lost Dr. Nick. Well, we'll go on to another question and come back to Dr. Nick for an intro. We just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background too about Dr. Nick, because he actually brings in a lot of expertise and knowledge to the conversation here. So it's just important for you guys to understand that. I'm not sure what happened here. It looks like we lost him, but we'll keep going. Let's see. We got another question here from Adam. Adding a small Bellus angel with an established powder blue Tang, 125 gallons, figure it can go either way.
Yeah, so powder blues, any fish from that genus of surgeonfish, the Zooxanthellae, are extremely aggressive and territorial fish. Yeah, like you said, it could go either way. I mean, Bellus angels are the Zooxanthellae genus is a much more passive angelfish, but that could also be a bad thing too. They don't tend to have a presence in the tank, so the powder blue is not going to be intimidated by that fish. If it's smaller, it's probably, I mean, if it's going to work, that's the best case scenario. If it's a smaller fish, it's female, so the coloration is going to be, it's going to be different. I'd like to say that the powder blue Tang is going to be pretty upset for the first day or two. Make sure you feed them well, and sorry, fingers crossed it's okay. I mean, powder blue Tangs can be very unpredictable. You know, that genus is notoriously aggressive. Yeah. And they will stress for the first day or two. So. All
right, let's go to this question. Let's see about this one. This actually came from Twitter from a Johnster Space Games. A question I have is, what can you do to make shy Corydoras catfish less shy? He's got some Agassiz Cory cats, and they stay in the back of the tank most of the time.
Generally, Corys, they tend to be a nocturnal feeder. So during the daytime when the lights are on, they're just kind of looking for shelter. Maybe you can, whatever they're hiding in the back, whether it be a structure or some plants or something, maybe you can rearrange your tank and maybe try to bring that towards the front. Because it's not uncommon for them to just kind of find a little quiet spot and sleep there during the day.
1 second. We lost you. Talking to our friend Dr. Nick, see if we can't get it back in here. Make sure he joins the conversation. So this is actually a common question I think we've gotten from the call center or just in general. Are corals plants or animals?
Yeah, so this is kind of a cool question. So a lot of people think that corals are plants because, or they're like underwater plants because they're really colorful like plants, and they're photosynthetic to some extent, but they're actually animals. The polyps are clear, and the color that you clear for the most part, and the color that you see is actually the Zooxanthellae algae that lives within the coral. And what the Zooxanthellae algae does is a symbiotic relationship where it actually uses the waste from the coral, kind of like, I'd say fertilizer, more or less, and it converts that to oxygen and carbohydrates, which the coral then uses as food, energy, nutrients, and so on. So it is it's kind of like a two-part, it's easy for it to be confused because an essential part of the coral is actually a plant, the algae, but the coral itself is actually an animal. Yeah,
I know that struck me as when I was first learning about corals and kind of like what makes them, what makes them up. The Zooxanthellae, I probably murdered that. Can you say that word again? Because that's a tough
Zooxanthellae.
Zooxanthellae. That one was always kind of blew my mind. It's really cool. I guess on the same thought about corals, common question. Actually, I think we took this from the team here. Difference between soft and hard corals.
Okay, yeah. So a soft coral is essentially that it's soft. So there's not a calcified skeleton. So if the coral were to perish, it actually would dissolve into the water, and there'd be no remnants of the coral. Versus a hard coral, whether it be an SPS or an LPS coral, actually has a calcified skeleton that it absorbs calcium from the water and builds that skeleton as it grows. So if the coral were to die, there would be remnants of that skeleton left over, and that's what you see like in a lot of gift shops and stuff like that, is the actual hard skeleton. Yeah. So here at the Coral Farm, when it comes to fragging corals, soft corals are a lot easier to frag because you don't really have to worry about that skeleton. It's as simple as just snipping them with a pair of scissors or a razor blade or whatnot, and then that tissue will heal, and then you'll have another coral. Versus a hard coral, you actually have to break the skeleton, and then that skeleton then needs to heal. So SPS corals, any branching type of corals, tend to be a little easier to frag versus the LPS corals that are non-branching. Those ones are really tricky to frag because they only have like essentially one polyp, like a meat coral or a brain coral.
Mm-hmm. We had a question from the comments here from a Storm. They have a 75-gallon long with a baby snowflake eel. He won't eat anything other than baby shrimp, even though they've offered them clams, crayfish, scallops. Sounds cruel, but should I starve him out to get him to eat a better diet? I know shrimp can only be bad for their livers. What do I do? He's housed with a pair of Scopus and Humu Trigger. He's about 2 months old now.
Yeah, so generally in the coral farm here, we like to offer
Go ahead.
we like to offer eels that are eating prepared foods such as either freeze-dried or frozen krill, clams, stuff like that, of that nature. So generally what we do, we'll actually just kind of hold off on feeding them. And, eels themselves have very poor eyesight, so they rely on their sense of smell. So with having some messy fish in there, like, what did you say? There was a Humu Trigger in there? Yeah, so you're going to be feeding them bigger chunks of food as well. He's probably going to get real excited every time you feed. So I would just honestly just keep an eye on him and try to make sure some of that food gets down to the bottom. You can also use a pair of tongs too and gently go down and kind of stick it right in his face, to be honest with you. I mean, if you go in there slow enough, like I said, he might not even really notice it, and then all of a sudden he'll smell it and grab it. So I think freeze-dried krill is probably the best approach. It has a really strong odor to it. So what I would do is put it in a little bit of the tank water so that it softens up. And then you can squeeze the air out of it and then grab a pair of tongs and just gently put it down there right in front of his nose. And I'm probably in a day or two to grab it.
Well, hope that helps. Welcome, Dr. Nick. I think we got you on now. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, sounds great. Sorry about the internet connection. It's just real spotty here.
No problem. Just want to quickly say thank you for joining in. I think we talked about last time in preparation for this one. It'd be good to have you talk a little bit about who you are and your background, because I think it's good for people to understand that.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm Dr. Nick St. Ern. I go by Dr. Nick, and I've been keeping aquariums since I was 9 years old, so that's quite a few years. I've been breeding fish, and then I went to my undergraduate was fisheries biology degree, and then I got a veterinary degree, and then I studied aquatic veterinary medicine. So my whole background has been based on fish health since I was a kid keeping aquariums. And then I worked in a private veterinary clinic where we also treated zoo and exotic animals, show animals, aquariums, private public aquariums. So I've done a lot of work with big animals besides fish. I started working in the pet industry in 1980s, but full-time in the 1990s. I worked in a retail pet industry as a fish health advisor, and I did that for over 20 years. And now I'm doing consulting work, and I'm working with a number of different fish suppliers, LiveAquaria, Tropical Fish Industry, Tropical Fish International, and helping with the fish health issues to keep the fish as healthy as possible. So for more than 40 years, I've been working with aquarium fish and as a veterinarian in fish health.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction. Really, like I said, it's a privilege to have you here. I really appreciate your time and, providing your expertise and your knowledge over the years to us and the community. So big thank you from everybody to you. We'll get into the next question, which actually is more, I think, up your alley. And this came from our call center. It's a common question we've got about how to diagnose and treat Uronema.
So Uronema is a protozoan parasite, a ciliated protozoa. We see it a lot on the marine fish, especially the green chromis and some of the related species. So what I would recommend is before adding any new fish into your marine aquarium is to do a quarantine. And think we already talked a little bit about that. You know, I always recommend a quarantine tank for any new additional fish before you put them into your main aquarium. But in general, most of these fish, once you get them in the quarantine tank, there's a couple different treatments you can use to eliminate Uronema. A freshwater dip for about 3 to 5 minutes is always helpful. You need to watch the fish, make sure you aerate the water during the freshwater dip. The fresh water will be absorbed inside of the parasites, causes the parasites to swell and explode. And so that's how you're trying to eliminate the parasites off the surface of the fish in a freshwater dip. It can affect the fish health as well. So if you see the fish starting to stress, you want to take it back out and put it into the marine water again. A second treatment, you could use formalin. That works pretty well in a quarantine tank. You wouldn't want to use it with in your main aquarium, but a quarantine tank, formalin, it'd be about 25 parts per million or milligrams per liter, which would roughly be about 2 drops per 10 gallons of water. And that works pretty well. And then another treatment would be Minfin. The nice thing about Minfin is it is safe for invertebrates. So you can use it with invertebrates, and it also has a neutralizer. So after you treat it, in 30 to 60 minutes, you remove the medication by the neutralizer, so you don't have any residual medicine in the tank. And then copper. You can use copper in the water to maintain a low level of copper during the quarantine period to also eliminate protozoans. Those would be probably the best way to do it. And you can expect Uronema to be pretty common until the fish get treated. And I know at LiveAquaria, Patrick is doing treatments on a routine basis for preventing Uronema. What are some of your protocols?
Well, we use formalin in our fish systems 5 days a week. So Monday through Friday, we dose formalin. And also on the more susceptible fish, like Dr. Nick said, chromis and especially Anthias, certain times of the year we're plagued by them. And we will give them a formalin and a malachite green bath, like a dip for a good 15, 30 minutes before they come in. If there's any fish that are show symptoms, those fish are automatically quarantined, and we repeat that dose daily until the symptoms disappear.
And formalin and malachite green is a common medication used for both freshwater and saltwater protozoa. And you can buy it over the counter, everything from, Quick Cure, Riddick, any of the ick parasite treatments will probably be formalin and malachite green. There are different concentrations, so you need to read the label and make sure you're using the dose based on the label, because they will have it dosed based on their formulation.
Awesome. Thank you both.
Dr. Nick, one thing too, when it comes to the freshwater dips, it's really important to make sure that the pH is equal to what the fish are naturally found in, right? So if you're doing a marine fish,
and the temperature,
that pH is closer to 8 versus a neutral pH too. I think a lot of people miss that step when they do a freshwater dip on a marine fish.
Yes, so you want to test it to make sure it's the same temperature as your aquarium water and the same pH as your marine water, and add an air stone so it's aerated.
Yep, that will help with the overall stress of the dip.
Awesome. Cool. I'll move on to another, I guess, let's see.
That swim bladder question's a good one.
Yeah, let's do that one. What causes swim bladder disease, and how do you want to take that one, Dr. Nick?
Sure. So there's a lot of different problems. A swim bladder problems is a symptom of disease. It's not the disease itself. So there is no one treatment because it depends on what causes it. So for example, some fish will have swim bladders that get water in them, and those will sink to the bottom, or they'll become deflated and they don't have enough gas in them, so they sink. Other times the swim bladder is overinflated, so the fish float. And with round-bellied goldfish, we'll see a lot of times they'll float upside down at the surface. That can be a primary swim bladder problem. It can also be due to having gas in the intestinal tract. And if they get the gas in the intestines are below the swim bladder in the fish, so they'll make the center of buoyancy change and the fish will invert and float upside down. If that's the case, we do recommend feeding the food for round-bodied goldfish underwater so they don't come to the surface to gulp air at the surface while they're feeding. Because if they do that and they get gas in the intestines, then they will rotate. If you feed them with a sinking pellet or flakes that you release underwater so that they're not at the surface, the goldfish can eat those without sucking in air, and it may help prevent that. Now, most fish don't have a problem sucking air at the surface, so your elongated fish, the fish that aren't rotund bodied, that doesn't make as much of a difference. Bacterial infections can cause gas bladder problems, and that can be one of the primary concerns. So if you do see gas bladder problems, first try feeding the fish underwater. Second, try some antibiotic medicated fish food, which is not as easily available anymore as it used to be, but you can make your own, and there are recipes for creating medicated fish food. You can also get the powdered gel diet, which you mix at home, and you can get antibiotics to feed them. That usually helps. If you need help getting antibiotics, which sometimes are available at pet stores, but if not, there is a list of veterinarians who treat fish on the World Aquatic Veterinary Medical Association website. That's WAVMA.org. And if you go to their website, there's a lot of information available for fish care, but there's also a Find a Vet section where you can put in your zip code or your city and find aquatic veterinarians who can help you. There's over 300 veterinarians that are working with aquarium fish, so or at least fish in general that might be able to help you.
I was just going to pull up that link real quick, put it in the chat that you mentioned so that people can use it.
I don't think that's it.
That's not it.
No.
Well, we'll come back to that and we'll share it in the chat. Oh, yeah, that's not it. Oh. Maybe Dr. Nick's going to help us out there. Can you hear us still okay?
Are you still there?
Yep, we're still here. Maybe some technical difficulties.
Okay, I suddenly got real quiet. I can see you, but I can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear us okay now?
Okay, go. Yeah, it's very faint. Go ahead, though.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pitch this one to Patrick. Why do Anthias swim upside down when you're first introduced into an aquarium?
So this is a common, I guess you call it phenomenon that we see here in the coral front when we bring in Anthias, you know, from a wholesaler or transship or whatever, that a lot of them, especially the younger ones, they tend to always swim upside down, which is really interesting. I mean, the staff love it and everything like that. And gradually, as they're here for a while, they tend to flip themselves back over and swim normally. So in the wild, Anthias, they're a schooling fish, so they tend to hang out in the reefs and, you know, in all the nooks and crannies and everything like that. So in my experience, watching them in the aquarium, it's almost as if they're lurking or preying underneath the coral edges. Which is really interesting to watch, you know, because they'll do, depending on the types of Anthias, some of them will swim, you know, nose down, but fathead Anthias do that too. So some of them are a deeper water Anthias as well, so they're not used to the light as much, so they tend to just kind of swim in pretty weird positions, you know.
I've noticed that
depending
too, yeah.
on, you know, where they're normally found.
Yeah. I don't have a whole lot of experience with Anthias, but that was always one thing that struck me about this species is that behavior. It seemed uncommon to me, and you know, it's good to know that it's not.
Yeah, it's even more interesting to see a group of 30 of them doing it, you know. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. But yeah, in my experience, once they're in the aquarium for a few days, they tend to right themselves and start acting or swimming normal.
Cool. Well, it looks like we lost Dr. Nick, unfortunately. I think he maybe has some connection issues. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. I'll take one from the call center here for Patrick. Kind of common mistakes in the new aquarium setup. I mean, would you say there's a big difference maybe between freshwater and saltwater, or are they kind of one and the same?
Well, like I alluded to earlier, not having a well thought out stocking plan is a big one. When you're getting into the hobby, you want to make sure you research the animals that you want to get, and you set up the aquarium around that. I mean, a great example is like we have a stingray out in our freshwater system that generally they get, you know, around 15, 16 inches or so in captivity, but they can get upwards of 30 inches as well. So if that's an animal that you really, really want to keep, you want to make sure that you plan accordingly. You don't want to have a standard 4-foot tank and get this stingray that's only 5 or 6 inches and not plan for the long term, because you may have trouble rehoming that. And then, like I said, stocking plan, you want to make sure that you add your least aggressive fish first, your most aggressive fish last, because a lot of new hobbyists come into frustrating times when they put in a really aggressive fish first and they want to add new fish to the tank, and it just doesn't work out. That established fish is going to terrorize any new additions, and you find yourself back at square one where you have to find a new home for your fish that you like, but is just a terror. And then probably the most obvious questions is making sure that you quarantine. A lot of people will skip the quarantine step. They think they found a trusted source and they just skip the quarantine step and they put their fish into an established tank, and then all hell breaks loose. And then also, another thing too is just stocking the aquarium too quickly. You got to make sure that you give time for the biological media, the bacteria in the tank to kind of ramp up every time you add a new fish, because every time you add a new fish, it's new waste, new food that's being added to the tank. So you got to give your biological filter time to ramp up to absorb that new waste that's being produced. So you want to make sure that you stock slowly.
That was always one big takeaway I had to get into this hobby, is like, go slow, don't rush it, take your time, as well as, make a plan, think about it before you actually just jump in. So
yeah, I always tell new hobbyists to look around, see what type of animals they want to keep, and then buy the aquarium around the animals. Don't start with a 10-gallon tank and just think about anything and everything.
Tony, I see your question. You should quarantine divers den fish too. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we go through, obviously Patrick can speak to it better than I can, as he lives and breathes it every single day. But yes, we always recommend to quarantine any and all fish you're going to add to your aquarium. Feel free to add in.
Yeah, I mean, here, one of the biggest steps that the heavy lifting that we do here is just transitioning them to captive life, making sure they're eating prepared foods and they're used to being in an aquarium with, other fish and so on. But, we quarantine everything for 2 weeks minimum. I mean, some species are longer, regal angelfish is a 30-day fish. Like, we keep that here in house for 30 days before we offer those.
Got some nice specimens too, don't we?
Yep. Oh yeah, we have some nice captive bred ones available right now, actually, and they're fancy too. So they're aberrations, So their sides aren't normal vertical stripes. They're squiggly lines. Yeah. They're wild.
Yeah, they look kind of like a different fish. They don't look like a normal regal angel.
Yep,
but they're beautiful.
They're nice and bright yellow too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely always quarantine your fish, because the stress of going from A to B to C to wherever is if it's going to cause some problems with the fish. So you want to make sure you give them time to settle in.
Solid. All right, we're going to take one more question. I'm going to pitch this one to Dr. Nick. It's from a Haley on Facebook, and I think you have a photo of them. I'm going to try to share it to the chat here, Dr. Nick, but I'll get to the question first. They have a 10-year-old goldfish sitting at the bottom of the aquarium. It's in 3.5-gallon tank, and for the last week stays on the bottom. He has a red sore on the belly, so I moved the gravel to one side so it can sit on the bottom and not get worse from staying on the gravel. I had the aquarium salt to the water. What else can I do? I'll let you take the question while I try to find that photo here quick.
Okay, that would be great if you could put up the photo, because the photo is really helpful. So, it's important to get all the information on these things when you're trying to do a veterinary consultation. And without the photo, it was really hard to discuss this case, because my first thought would be, we talked about gas bladder problems, that the gas bladder maybe wasn't working right and it was sinking. But when I saw the photo, it was obvious that this fish would actually have an internal swelling in the coelom, which the coelom is the fish's version of an abdomen. So we'll call it an abdomen. And it had an abdominal swelling, which I could tell from looking at the photo. And the interesting thing is there was a photo from previously, I don't know if it was a year ago or some time ago, and the fish had a swollen abdomen at that time, but was acting and swimming normally. So the owner wasn't aware that the abdomen was swollen. Probably thought it was just normal fat fish, but it had an abnormal swelling of the abdomen. It eventually got to the point where this swelling was so large it was causing a lesion on the surface of the skin. So the outside of the skin was becoming abraded and reddened from the inside, not from the outside. And the fish was sitting on the bottom of the tank. Because of this red sore, the owner moved the gravel so that it wasn't sitting directly on the gravel. It was sitting actually on the glass bottom of the aquarium, which was probably helpful. But since the abrasion was actually from the inside out rather than from rubbing against the gravel, it didn't really make a lot of difference. And the treatment for this goldfish, ideally, for example, if it was a koi, which is a much bigger fish, we could have gone in and surgically removed it. And we've successfully done surgery on lots of koi, taking out abdominal tumors, which typically turn out to be gonadal tumors, so ovarian or testicular tumors. I imagine that's probably what happened with this goldfish. It was 10 years old, so it was obviously sexually mature. It had never been bred because it was the only goldfish in the tank. So my guess is it was probably a female, became egg bound and never released the eggs. And therefore we see that those tend to become abnormal and maybe either infected or more likely cancerous. And that's what the problem was. The other concern, this fish was in a 3.5 gallon tank, which is fine for a baby goldfish, which this goldfish was a prize at a carnival. That's how the owner got it. But goldfish do grow and they get up to be about a foot long. So a 20-gallon aquarium at the minimum should have been appropriate for this a goldfish, even just one goldfish. And so because it was in a small aquarium, it was stunted and it was only maybe 4 or 5 inches long, which, you know, a healthy goldfish will get that big in 2 years. So if it's not in a bigger aquarium, it never grew any bigger, and that can't say that was responsible for why the fish had the problem, because we see this in older fish all the time, and many species of fish will get gonadal sarcomas or, you know, tumors. But because this had progressed for a period of time, by the time I saw the photograph, it really wasn't a treatable condition at that point. Any luck showing the photo?
Yeah, sorry, a little bit of delay on my end. We're having some technical difficulties.
Okay.
Just about ready to put it in there. So
okay. Yeah, if you look at the photo, you'll see that the fish is actually very swollen in the abdomen, in the caudal portion of the abdomen, which back there, the only thing that should be there is the gonads. And the swelling is causing a redness and stretching of the skin. We'll put the photo in comments if we don't get it up right away, or we can post it in a comment and you can take a look at it.
I'm trying to post it, but it's just not going. So
can you hold it in your camera up to the?
Oh, there we go.
Do you have it on your phone? You can hold it up to the camera.
Well, I got my camera. I got it all set up, so I can't take it off.
Okay.
But it should be in there.
Okay. Yeah. We'll post it in comments.
Yeah, it should be there. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it there a couple times. I think we're about time. We're a little bit over. I just want to say thank you, first of all, to everyone who showed up and attended our live Q&A. I really appreciate the questions we took, as well as the questions we answered that came in earlier. As we said before, we do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. CST. So, you know, definitely don't forget to go check out our Facebook events page. We've got a regular recurring event for every Wednesday at 1 p.m. CST where we're doing this live Q&A. as well as every Monday we're doing a live dive sale where we're offering up exclusive deals on quality aquatic life from our Divers and WYSIWYG store. So definitely go RSVP to both of those, and you don't want to miss out on what we got coming up there. As always, if you have any questions you would like to have answered, even now or between this Wednesday and next Wednesday, feel free to send it to us either in the comments here or however you like through Facebook. That's fine. You can do it to the events page. That's the best way to do it, is in the live Q&A events page discussion. So go ahead and share it there, and we'll add it to our list. Thank you, Dr. Nick, for joining us where you are, and thank you, Patrick, also for your time. Until then, or until next time, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Dr. Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Nick.
Bye, everybody.